Who Gets to Decide? A liberty-based podcast that brings a little piece of sanity to a confused society drowning in a culture of craziness. And here is your host, Seth Martin.
Well, all right. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Who Gets to Decide. This is episode 626. Thank you for joining me this evening. Glad you're here and always happy you're listening. Well, I'm seeing more and more on X about the social credit system, and it's a little bit, I guess, disturbing. You know, it's kind of a dystopian type of thing, and I just, to me, you know, I get in these conversations with people all the time, and it's kind of like this, what's the big deal kind of thing, you know. We're more or less free, Seth, you know, I feel pretty free and things like that. And to me, it's a lot like being sort of pregnant. I mean, you're either pregnant or you're not. There's no, well, I'm half pregnant or I'm a third pregnant or anything like this, right? This is kind of the way I think about freedom. I think freedom is very much this way. I think people are either free or not free. I don't think there's this middle way. I forgot who said it one time, but they said any compromise between food and poison results in death. And I think that's the way freedom is. Now, I'm a radical, okay? I admit that. I'm more radical in my views than most people. But the reason I'm this way, the reason I feel this way about this is because the government's like a 2-year-old, right? You give them an inch, they take a mile. I mean, you know, they're just that way. You can't give them anything because they'll take that and then they'll want more. You know, it's when my kids were young, my wife used to read this book called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, you know, he's going to want a glass of milk. And if he wants a glass of milk, then he's going to want this. And it just kind of kept going and going and going. And that I know these are simplistic ideas, but that's the way I feel about the government. I think the government, it always grows. It never shrinks in its power, in its size, in its influence over our lives. And to me, when the government grows, individual liberty shrinks. And so these things, it's like a seesaw, you know, individual liberty being on one side of the seesaw. Or like if you look at the logo for Who Gets to Decide, you have liberty and you have tyranny. And as tyranny grows, liberty weakens. And so this is just, I think, a first principle. This is kind of just basic principles of liberty and tyranny. And so I wanted to talk about this social credit score thing in China because I'm starting to think this is why all these data centers are being built. It's not so much that they're going to take your jobs. It's that they're going to surveil every little thing you do in the public world. Everything you buy, everything you watch on the internet, everything you listen to, everybody you speak to, everywhere you go, it will all be surveilled. At first, just with your phones. But then you're going to see there's, I think, 200 million cameras or something. It was some weird number like that. Maybe it wasn't 200 million. But they say it in one of these videos about how many cameras there are in China. They're just ubiquitous. They're everywhere. And you'll see that they have software tied to facial recognition, and they're just tracking their people all day long, every day. And one foundational part of liberty is anonymity or privacy. And we're starting to lose this with our money, for example, because everything's on a credit card, or everything, maybe one day everything will be on not a Bitcoin, but a CBDC, and every transaction will be tracked. And one of the nice things about cash or coins in your pocket is nobody knows. You can go buy something. Now people will say, yeah, but that promotes drug abuse and all this other stuff. Yeah, but it also promotes liberty. Like, I can go buy something and I can pay cash and the government can't tax me. If you think about it, let's say I go buy a car from somebody. Well, that car's not a good example. Let's have him to buy a dirt bike. Okay. The person that originally bought the dirt bike from a dealer paid tax on it. Okay. And I go buy the dirt bike from him, secondhand. Well, I don't have to pay tax, especially if I pay cash. Okay. And so it's a way to opt out of the state's racket, the state's system. And so this is kind of an element of privacy, right? But you're going to see when we show these videos that there's no privacy in this social credit system where your every move is tracked. It's linked to your every transaction. It's linked to where you can go. You'll see here, this guy is a journalist. He's not a criminal, okay? He can't buy a train ticket to go somewhere. And so this is a very serious thing. And to have something like this in America really is a real head scratcher. And I don't know how anybody could really justify it. But let's listen to this report and come back on the other side and talk about it.
Some claim the Chinese Communist Party's social credit system doesn't exist. Well, I'm here to tell you it does, but it's not how you think. Those that have low social credit scores are publicly shamed. But that's not all. It's only part of the comprehensive policing and surveillance apparatus, which also includes police drones, Skynet tracking to locate someone who made online comments about the government, and applications to geolocate those around you, as well as facial scans and real ID verifications everywhere you go. These all feed back into the social credit system where you are barred from loans, taking transportation, or owning a business. All of these are made to ensure that people do not speak, do, or to think to challenge the government, because the social restrictions are heavy burdens to bear. The CCP knows where everyone is at all times and what they're doing at all times. This is why they're lying to you to suggest they cannot track down a fentanyl network going out of China. It's simply they're unwilling to look. The goal is to police innocent people in China, not to crack down on mass criminal efforts. Share this video so more can be aware.
Yeah, I think he's right. I think, you see that in this country. You see the laws that when certain laws are broken, the government pursues them more aggressively. Like we saw this with January 6th. If Nancy Pelosi gets embarrassed because a bunch of people rioted at the Capitol, then that cannot stand. We cannot let people know that that's okay. So we have to punish them to the full extent of the law. And, this is really runs counter to what America's all about. We're supposed to be able to redress our government, with our complaints and with our feedback. This is a government of, for, and by the people. And you're hearing about people here getting punished for criticizing the government. Well, criticizing the government is that's in the First Amendment in America. That's freedom of speech. So what could possibly be the purpose of something like this in America other than to control people, to make your life smaller, to lower your carbon footprint, which is a stupid idea that really has no basis in reality? These are their goals. And they pretty much tell us this. I mean, I'm not speculating on what these goals are. They tell us what they're trying to do. And so, this is really disturbing. And if you can see it happening in China, there are already people here. We've talked about this before, but there's already people here that are jealous of China. Like, they're jealous that they can build a bridge in a month. Okay. They can just conscript people over there and they build a bridge in a month, and you can just hear it that they're just frustrated. That can't happen in America. Or that they can't flood 200 million acres and create the Three Gorges Dam and just dislocate 2 million people on a decree. This really frustrates certain people in America. And they think somehow that China's society is better for this. These are people that should be very, very, very far away from political power. But these are people running the halls of Congress. No, there's no doubt about it. All right, let me jump into the next clip. And this next clip is of Edward Snowden. And this is more of the nuts and bolts of what we see with this social credit system. And you can hear him talk about it, which I think is interesting.
what they call the social credit system. If any of these family photos, if any of your activities online, if your purchases, if your associations, if your friends are in any way different from what the government or the powers that be of the moment would like them to be, you're no longer able to purchase train tickets. You're no longer able to board an airplane. You may not be able to get a passport. You may not be eligible for a job. You might not be able to work for the government. All of these things are increasingly being created and programmed and decided by algorithms. And those algorithms are fueled by precisely the innocent data that our devices are creating all of the time, constantly, invisibly, quietly, right now. Our devices are casting all of these records that we do not see being created, that in aggregate seem very innocent. You were at Starbucks at this time. You went to the hospital afterwards. You spent a long time at the hospital. After you left the hospital, you made a phone call. You made a phone call to your mother. You talked to her until the middle of the night. The hospital was an oncology clinic. Even if you can't see the content of these communications, the activity records, what the government calls metadata, which they argue they do not need a warrant to collect, tells the whole story. And these...
Yeah, it seems to me that, I can almost kind of see a day in the future where we just all kind of refuse to use our phones anymore. We're just not going to we're just not going to use phones. Or if we do, we'll turn on our cell phone, make a call, and then leave our cell phone at home or whatever. There may be coming a day where you have to do things like this, where you can't just pick up your cell phone and take it with you because you're being tracked constantly. And notice that the thing about it is, what you notice about all this social credit score and this way of kind of controlling people. We're going from controlling the narrative to controlling actual people. And what I've noticed about it is it's never for the powerful. It's never for the politicians. It's never for the powerful people running powerful corporations that are connected to government. It's always just for the average dude or gal or family. And this is a type of caste system, like where there's some that are free or more or less free. And then there's others that are just tax cattle. Sorry, y'all, I'm getting over a cough. This is the cold and flu edition of Who Gets to Decide. But, Edward Snowden, this is a guy, he's a technologist. He understands all this stuff. And he risked his whole life really to let us know about how the government was spying on us, and I just think it's great that he does all this from Russia. Supposedly Russia's less free than we are, but I've heard him interviewed, and he doesn't really talk about how his freedom is really restricted in Russia. The KGB never comes and visits him. Nobody from the government ever comes and visits him. And in fact, you got Putin on TV talking about all this negative stuff in the West, and kind of like what we've said on the show is we're embracing kind of totalitarianism, and some of these former totalitarian places like Russia are kind of embracing more of a freedom atmosphere. And I don't know, it's just something to worry about going forward in our future. Are we really just going to be kind of spied on 24/7, and then that information is going to be used to control what we can buy, where we can go, who we can talk to, where we can travel, how we can travel, how far we can travel, all these kinds of things. So the technology's there. This is what Edward Snowden's talking about. They don't even need warrants. It's just metadata. That's all it is. We don't need a warrant for that. We're not spying on your conversations. I mean, as far as we know, they're not. But they're tracking us all the time. In fact, this is one of the things they did to the people on January 6th, is they went back and they got all this geolocation data, and they were able to tell who was at the Capitol. And they just went and they found where their addresses were, and they went and visited them at their homes and arrested them. They basically did a political calculation and decided, yeah, we can arrest all these people and put them in jail, and nobody will really care. And so that's what they did. All right, let's let Ed Snowden finish up here, and we'll jump to the next clip here in a second.
Activity records are being created and shared and collected and intercepted constantly by companies and governments. And ultimately it means as they sell these, as they trade these, as they make their businesses on the backs of these records, what they are selling is not information. What they are selling is us. They're selling our future. They're selling our past. They are selling our history, our identity, and ultimately they are stealing our power and making our stories work for them.
Yeah, I remember when social media first started, Facebook started coming around, and you know, some of these documentaries came out where they talked about Facebook, and there was a lot of discussion about the psychological effects of Facebook and things like this. And one of the guys said on there is, if you're looking at a business and you can't figure out what the product is, most likely you're the product. And I guess that's kind of what's going on here is there's some less nefarious reasons why people want to know about our habits. You know, there's advertisers out there that want to know about my shopping habits and my internet browsing habits and things like that. And I get that. And I'm not so worried about that, except as far as, you know, when it comes to the government, them just handing the data over. One of the things that Ed Snowden blew the whistle on was how the government just came and just asked for, you know, AT&T and Verizon for these connections into their data networks. And AT&T and Verizon just did it. They didn't even put up a fight. They just sold their customers out to the government. And so I worry a little bit about corporations doing that, you know, not having the backbone to say, no, these are our customers. We have data security requirements that we have in all our terms of service, and we're not sharing this data with you. It almost feels like you just can't rely on that, especially given the past history. All right, there's another clip here that I want to play, and this is more like a documentary that I saw that it's just a real head scratcher when you watch this. You almost can't even believe where it goes. But pay attention to this.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Okay. It's a matter of principle? What principle? Can you imagine being at the mall and just seeing these huge screens with people's faces on them? And the purpose of that is just to shame them, you know, to let everybody know that they're not good citizens. And so she's talking about there's a principle. Well, what principle is she talking about? This is what I mean. Look, I'm going to divert here for just a second and talk about immigration and assimilation. But this is what I mean by you can't take in huge numbers of people from other places and effectively assimilate them. Is because they have ideas like this. And if you have too many people with ideas like this, then you wake up one day and you're living in China, but in America. So sorry guys, this is what I'm talking about. When you take in too many poor people from Latin America, they don't know anything about liberty. All they've ever known is the local strongman, tribalism, and things like this. And all of a sudden, your society is just overwhelmed with these people. And they all have ideas like this. Like there's some principle that she imagines that's undergirding the reason why people need to be tracked, every little thing be tracked, and then they get shamed in public. There's some principle there in her mind that she imagines, but there's no principle there. It's just she believes the propaganda that the government has told them that these people are bad citizens, and therefore we must out them to everybody else and let everybody know who the bad citizens are. And that's great, maybe, until you're one of the bad citizens. And you're going to see a guy here in a minute that just doesn't look like a bad citizen to me, but he is very much on the list.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
These people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price. Well, let me just say that some of the least honest people in America are the 535 people sitting in Congress, in the United States Congress, and they're not paying any price. Again, this is just an example of these laws are for thee, not for me, right? The law is for you, dear comrade, not for me, the dictator or the ruler or the political class or the connected class or the deep state or whoever you want to call these people. The rules are not for them. The rules are for us. And they don't have any intention of being controlled by something like this. This is something they simply institute for my benefit and your benefit, not for the ruling class's benefit.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to zero. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them...
Okay, before we go to this guy, it's only right to pay your debts. I mean, tell that to the President of the United States. I think he filed bankruptcy 3 times. Okay? Tell that to JP Morgan Chase and all the banks that got bailouts in 2008. The reason they got bailouts is because they had too many debts. They had more liabilities than they had assets. And they didn't pay their debts. And they got bailed out. So again, this is just another example of this. These rules are for you and me. This is not for the connected people. So you can't fall for this. I mean, it's wrong anyway. It's just dead wrong. But these people have deluded themselves, these people that are commenting, into thinking that this applies to everybody in China. But this does not apply to everybody in China. Only the people that fall out of favor with the politically connected. And the politically connected themselves are miles away from this social credit system. They're just not even being considered as part of that. All right, this is that journalist I was telling you about.
Is this journalist Liu Hu? He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members.
He was uncovering corruption? Well, we don't want anybody to do that. Can you imagine? You're blacklisted because you were trying to uncover corruption. And now you can't buy a train ticket. You can't go anywhere. You can't buy anything. This is not equity, okay? This is not equality. See, all this stuff gets instituted under the guise of equality or fairness or whatever. And what you find out is it's just the opposite of that. People that are connected, people that are part of the government, friends of the government. Back when Bill Clinton, was president, we had friends of Bill, okay? Those people aren't affected by these things. It's your average person who wakes up one day and is literally having to look at their phone every day to try to figure out where they can go and what they can buy. That is not freedom, people. That is the opposite of freedom. And you're going to hear some more examples of it here right now.
After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. He only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Because he was trying to uncover corruption. See, you can't, well, that's untrustworthiness. If you're trying to uncover corruption, well, we can't have that. That means you're not a good citizen. Well, by that definition, a good citizen is someone who's corrupt. And so this is what I mean. You create upside down world where up is down and down is up and good is bad and bad is good. It's just a tool. It's a tool for, it's like the media. It's like controlling the narrative. That's a tool. And what you're finding in America, one of the reasons I think this is going to become popular in America is because the narrative is no longer working. Okay, I don't know if you notice that or not. But only people that are maybe older than 70 are watching, cable news anymore. Certainly nobody 45 and below or 40 and below is watching cable news. Nobody. Okay? Well, what does that mean? That means 40 years and younger. That means a huge swath of the population in America is no longer being led around by the nose about what the truth is, what's true and what's not true. And so once that narrative situation doesn't work anymore, then what's next? We got to go to a new level of totalitarianism, because this soft totalitarianism is no longer working, because you don't believe what we say anymore. You don't believe in our institutions. You don't believe in us as leaders. And so I guess we're just going to have to step it up a notch. And so that's kind of where this is, I think, probably going. And it's pretty darn scary, because I don't know if you guys have noticed that or not. We haven't really talked much about it on the show, but there is, like, Donald Trump's support among younger than 40-year-olds or something just collapsed to nothing when it comes to Israel and our foreign policy with Israel and things like that. Before October 7th, it was like plus 48. Now it's down to like 2. I mean, people they just don't believe that anymore. And why would you? Okay, yes, October 7th was horrible and it's unexcusable for sure. But how can you look at these videos of Gaza and where it looks like the surface of the moon, and not go, oh, that's evil shit right there. That's way out of bounds for normal human behavior. And so they've just lost it. They've just lost this whole group of people. And I really think it's one of the reasons Charlie Kirk was probably killed, is he was in control of these people, and they saw it earlier on. They saw it slipping away. And, you know, the Republicans, the only channel that they had to young people was through this TPUSA group. That was it. And Charlie was starting to change his mind on all that stuff, and that they just couldn't, that just could not be. They couldn't be with that. And I don't know who they is. I don't know if it was, there's also some money stuff going on, you know, within TPUSA. Candace Owens is all over it. A lot of people are really upset about Candace Owens, like Tim Pool. Tim Pool's really upset. I might do something, maybe a next show or something on this, because, you know, you see people kind of reverting back to the political part. Like at first the truth was important and everybody was speaking the truth. And now all of a sudden some people have pulled that back, and now they're talking about the midterms, or they're talking about the next presidential race and how that's super important. Have you ever noticed that, like your friends will tell you, we just can't afford it. I mean, America's not going to survive if we lose this election to the Democrats. You know, every election like that is like that. Like, this is the most important election of our lives. You know, every one is like this. And, you know, I think people are just not buying it anymore. You know, they're like, I mean, I no doubt that Kamala Harris would have been an unmitigated disaster, but the Democratic Party wouldn't have paid the price. You and I would have paid the price. Our inflation is what would have gone up, and we would have had more regulations on us and things like that. It wouldn't hurt the government at all. The government, people would still be clamoring for the government to do more, save us from this evil capitalism and shit like that. I mean, people are totally confused about some of that stuff. All right, let's wrap this documentary up, and we'll have some closing comments.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
Yu Hu is among a tiny minority of people who have dared to criticize the system, which some are calling a digital dictatorship.
I worry, because I think many people like me will be deprived of individual freedoms.
Yeah, that's exactly what will happen. It kind of reminds me of like I get in these discussions sometimes with friends and family members about the police. And you see this a little bit with the police, like, you know, they tend to charge you with let's say you did something wrong. Okay. I mean, it's not even in question whether you did something wrong or not. But what they do is they find a way to charge you with 5 or 6 things, or even 3 things. And what they want to do is they want to leverage you and say, look, if you want, we can dismiss these other two charges, but you have to plead guilty to this charge. And what you're faced with is, okay, do I want to fight about this a year in court or whatever, or should I take this deal? I mean, this is how people get convicted. And so it's the same way with this kind of thing. It's like, this guy, what's this guy going to do? What's he going to do? You know, once you're in a system like this, you're in it. It's not like in the early 1900s where, 80% of the population in America lived on farms and you could take care of yourself. We need this complex, system to survive. People need to be able to go to the grocery store. They need to be able to go to a gas station and get gas. If you can't, I was listening to somebody one day and they were like, yeah, if you're sick, you miss work, you lose your job, and then you're done. The bills just keep coming in, and next thing you know, you're headed for bankruptcy. And so in this complex society that we live in, with complex systems and stuff, this is a very, very dangerous thing. I don't know if you remember when we talked about Mao Zedong and some other Chinese leaders, and we were talking about, I can't remember what the subject was, but one of the things I mentioned is that when you have a central plan and the plan fails, it fails spectacularly. And a lot of people die as a result. And the example I gave was that Mao Zedong in China wanted to do these co-ops with the farmers. And I don't know, I can't remember the entire story, but bottom line is food production went way down and something like 5 million people in China starved. All because one guy thought it would be a good idea to pool efforts and things like that. This is no different, okay? It's just a more sophisticated scheme. But it's a group of people thinking that, oh, this is a better way to manage society, to control society, to make sure there's order. The truth is there's spontaneous order, okay, in cooperation, in trading and things like this. You don't need an all-powerful government with an eye on everything to threaten people to behave, okay? Now, what you do need is you need to prosecute crimes, which you see these people like this guy that set this woman on fire on this train a while back in New York. He was arrested like 79 times. Okay. So what we're doing, it's just like the what I was talking about earlier, the most aggressive crimes, that the state pursues against people are things like speeding tickets and just a bunch of little minor crimes. Okay. But for the major stuff, they just let that go unpunished. And it's almost like they do this on purpose. It's like, well, we can't control that guy anyway, and we don't have room for him in the prisons. So just bring him in and process him. But if you got a guy who's got a job and he's a 9-to-5 schlep, and you can soak him for some money, or you can kind of scare him into behaving, curtailing his behavior or whatever, well, then you're the perfect mark for the government. This is just, I don't know if it's intentional, but this is how it kind of plays out. That's why you get the guy that stabbed that lady in the neck. He was arrested like 40 plus times. Okay. So it's not an accident that the craziest, most violent people are living among us. And guys like you and me are being harassed by little shit all the time. Okay. They just make it so costly for us. We got to go hire a lawyer and pay him $10,000, and we got to go to court, and then we get this and that, and and you're missing too much work, and it's just. So what happens is those are like chilling on your behavior. You tend to, okay, well, I'm just going to putt around at 45 miles an hour, or I'm not going to get involved. Like if I see somebody getting beat up, some big guy's beating up some young lady, well, I'm not going to get involved because I'll get dragged into something by the state and it'll cost me 500 hours of my life and, $200,000. And it's just all kind of related to this kind of thing. But I'm really concerned the thing I'm concerned about is that the narrative has been lost by these seats of power. Nobody trusts the institutions anymore. Not really. Well, let's say there's still some normies out there that trust the institutions, but every day it's going away. Every day people believe less and less of what they hear and see on the news, especially when it pertains to the government. And so to me, the next step is what we just spent the last 30 minutes observing here on the show, is some sort of digital prison or digital minimum security prison for the comrades, your average Joes. So anyway, with that, that's really all I want to say about that. It's something that bothers me a lot, about technology. And I see us building a lot of data centers. And I just don't buy that AI is going to replace everybody's job. I mean, what I always tell people is just next time you pull to an intersection, just notice how you and everybody at the intersection is stopped at a red light and nobody is crossing the intersection. I mean, I think about that all the time. I think, how is AI going to take my job when we can't even make the intersections smart enough to turn green when I pull up to it? I pull up to intersections all the time where there's nobody else in the intersection and my light is red. Or I pull up to a red light and everybody else is sitting at a red light. It's like, what? AI is going to take my job? I don't buy it. So anyway, maybe we'll do a show about that too. I don't know. But anyway, listen, guys, go out and share the show, subscribe, like the show. Go to YouTube. These are on YouTube now. Go to YouTube, like the show. It helps the algorithms find other people, other like-minded people that want to listen to this kind of conversation and think about it and try to see, where this might go. I don't know. Some people aren't interested in where it might go. I am, but I don't know exactly where it'll go. I just know that it's going to be like a chess match, right? The government's going to make a move and then I'm going to make a move. And the government's going to make a move and then I'm going to make a move. And it'll go on like that. And it won't just be me. It'll be millions of people because people don't want to be controlled. We talk about it all the time on the show. Freedom is a very popular idea. You don't have to pay people off to be free. You don't have to persuade them to be free. People just naturally like freedom. And so they're going to resist control. That's just human nature. All right. With that, I'm going to wrap up the show. Thanks for coming in, everybody. Thanks for listening. Come back in a couple days. We'll have a new show for you on Who Gets to Decide. All right. Peace.